Good morning. That's all you got? Good morning. Hey, I forgot, you guys have flown from the West Coast. It's actually like 4 a.m. or something for many of you. But first of all, I want to begin with gratitude, and certainly gratitude to the three founders, so Christian, Jacob, Delian. Just 4 years ago, this was conceived, and now this is, again, one of the most influential conclaves of Silicon Valley coming to Washington, D.C., and thank goodness they came up with this idea in 2021, because your voice matters now more than it ever has before. And so I also want to extend gratitude to each of you making a decision to, in many cases, fly from around the country to be here, to be here participating and helping to drive policy forward. So with that, again, gratitude to all of you. As Jacob said at the beginning, I've got a similar path to many of you. I started out as an entrepreneur with a startup, fought through decades of startup, had a successful IPO, had a great run as a public company, got acquired, stayed at that large company, and that large company was Microsoft, stayed there. All 2,000 of us at Great Plains joined Microsoft. I stayed there as we grew from 40,000 to 90,000 people. I had people working in 120 countries around the world. Had an opportunity to see what all of you have seen, which is that software is the greatest invention to extend human capability in our lifetimes and in perhaps the history of humanity. It's been just a game changer. And during the times, there's almost 3 decades that I was in tech, and specifically in software, 1 billion people around the planet were raised out of poverty because of the innovation that was being driven out of America in terms of advancements in productivity and raising and the disbursement of that capability around the planet. It was a miracle. And now here we stand on the cusp of where AI is taking us. And it's going to be leaps beyond what any of us have seen. I think even many people that are in the industry or spent their careers in the industry have a hard time understanding fundamentally that we're at this point where AI is going to take us to places where software changed every job, every company, and every industry. AI is going to do that at some multiple level of that. It's going to do it with a speed that we haven't seen. We're going to be curing diseases. We've just essentially solved the shortage of software developers with one invention, because as all of you know, I mean, the current versions of AI can code at levels that 90% of software developers can. So we're at a remarkable thing. Policymakers don't understand it. I hope that all of you understand it, but policymakers may hear the word AI, but they don't quite grab the impact this is going to have on every job, every company, every industry, and it's going to have an impact on defense. It's going to certainly has an impact on the cybersecurity of our company, our country, our data, and our infrastructure. But the point of all that is that there has to be this understanding. Your presence here matters to try to drive the policies, because we can lead in technology all we want, but now we're at a different point. We're at a point where few people had connected the dots that you can't win the AI arms race without enough electricity to drive the manufacturing of intelligence. An AI data center is a manufacturing hub, and it manufactures intelligence. And if we don't have enough power, we're going to lose the AI arms race. And the AI arms race with China is one of the 2 existential threats that I feel we face as a country. The other is obviously Iran getting a nuclear weapon. That's something that we can't let happen, just like we can't allow ourselves to lose the AI arms race to China. And we need power. But we've been stuck and I would say Silicon Valley's been commingled with this idea for the last several decades, that somehow there's an idea that the climate extremist agenda, that somehow, a degree of temperature change in the year 2100 is the thing that we should drive every policy in America. And I've always been a little offended by that. I'm a curious person. I'm curious about, how a group could, take a spreadsheet and extrapolate data, for 90 years, 80 years, now 75 years, and say this is absolutely what's going to happen. Because many of you, have you guys seen any business plan and any projection ever turn out exactly the way it was going to be for a startup? No, I don't think so. So it's like, but somehow somehow the nation and the policymakers were putting faith in this idea that this thing was an absolute, and if you spoke out against it or even questioned it or were curious about it, then you get canceled. And why I was offended by it was because, having spent my life in innovation, like all of you, understanding that innovation has been the source of American greatness. It always has been and it always will be, was sort of precluding that somehow over the next century, that between now and 2100, we weren't going to be able to have any new invention to bend or change a curve. And it would be like sitting around in 1925 and saying, I'm going to tell you exactly, I'm going to be a future fortune teller. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen in the year 2000. But whoops, they forgot to figure out, that Noyce was going to invent the chip in 1958. They forgot, that Gordon Moore was going to come along and go, wow, look at this, Moore's Law. And we're going to have the explosion of technology that we've had. And now you throw AI in the mix. We know AI is here. It's not like a mystery. It's coming. And people have known it's coming. We've always known that we were going to get to this point of capability. It's been predicted and predictable that we were going to get here. It wasn't a mystery in like 1925 versus 1958, and boom, I mean, something you never saw coming, and here's the chip that's going to transform everything. So do a group of all of smart people like you really believe that we're not going to be able to solve an issue around a degree of temperature change in this country when we've got AI and we've got that capability? Of course, but in the short term, but in the next few years, even though we might have a slight lead in technology ahead of China, but China's a fast follower. That's a polite way of saying they copy and everything. And I know, and I'm not saying this as a politician. I'm saying this because my first trip as a student to China was 1980. That was interesting. They were barely opening up. My first time there as an entrepreneur was in 1989. And we were not selling, Great Plains was not, we were not selling internationally. We were selling in Canada. We were starting to move into, other elements of the British Empire. I was on my way back from a trip to Australia where we were setting up international distribution capability for our accounting software in Australia. And I was going to swing through China on the way back. And I got there and they said, hey, there's a street market where they're selling software. You should check it out. I went down there and I thought, wow, maybe I'll see, a copy of Lotus 123, the leading spreadsheet at the time. Maybe I'll see some other stuff. And I went in there, and as a joke, I said, hey, do you have any Great Plains? Thinking like, no one's ever heard of us. We're a little startup company in North Dakota. And they said, right over here, sir. And I could buy a copy of our software for $1 on a 5 1/4 inch floppy in 1989. That was the first time I realized, wow, everything we make, they're pirating. They meaning China. And then I had an opportunity to be chairman of multiple other public software companies. I had an opportunity to serve as corporate officer of Microsoft for 7 years, from 2000 to 2007. Everything we made was stolen. Even at Microsoft, 1% of the copies of Windows and Office were getting paid for in China. So I'm not standing up here, making pejorative comments as someone who's in elected office or an appointed office now. I'm just saying my life experience is that fast follower is code word for they're going to steal our IP. And so if we have a slight lead in technology and AI, and then you're going to have a fast follower coming at you, you better make sure that we have enough electricity. But that's my point here, is I'm wearing two hats. I'm wearing the Secretary of Interior, but I'm also chair of the National Energy Dominance Council, the NEDC. And it's easy to remember that. Think of AC/DC with the lightning bolt. This is NEDC, because we already had an NEC, the National Economic Council, and you know how many acronyms are in government. You can't have two important organizations with the same acronym. So NEDC, housed inside the White House, our job is to help make sure one of the goals that we have is to make sure, one of the mandates we have, one of the directions from President Trump is to make sure we don't lose this arms race, make sure we have enough electricity to power this country, and make sure we have enough critical minerals, and make sure that we've got enough ability to sell energy to our friends and allies so they don't have to buy it from our adversaries. You don't end up with Western Europe being dependent on an adversary for their energy. So we've got multiple goals that we're pursuing. But the one that's most important to this group is focused here is domestic electricity. And guess what China's been doing? Okay, we've had a war going against thermal coal since Obama took office. And it's an incredible, source of energy. We've got hundreds of years worth. We have all the technology innovation that exists in places like my home state, where we can take out every emission that you would be concerned about, including CO2. That can all be solved with innovation. It can all be, that CO2 can be used as value-added products. It can be sequestered. It can be used for enhanced oil recovery. We had a company that was taking CO2, putting it in the ground, more in the ground than the oil was coming up, with people producing carbon-negative barrels of oil. You don't need to, go have $900 per avoided ton subsidies that all of you are paying for to drive an EV. We can decarbonize liquid fuels. All of this available through innovation. We can do all that. But meanwhile, it's like, no, we got a 4-letter word. We hate it. It's called coal. It's not big, beautiful coal. Any coal plant running in America today is incredibly clean. They've survived the toughest. Many of you would be out of business and would not have survived the assault on your businesses if you were regulated as heavily as the coal industry has been. Anybody that's still standing is an innovator and a patriot in that business. And our job is to make sure that we don't close any more of them. Our job is to make sure we don't become Spain. Spain celebrated the closing of the last coal plant on April 12th, just over a month ago. They were celebrating a week ago about how they'd achieved their first day of all renewables, and then they were shocked to find out that the physics of the grid, when you don't have the actual physical mass of flywheels running in places like thermal plants run by natural gas or run by coal or run by geothermal or run by hydro, where you've got permanent 7 by 24-hour power, you can have grid failure. That's a window of what could happen in the U.S. We came dangerously close to that story being about us this winter. On the day that President Trump was elected, or not elected, the day that he was inaugurated on January 20th, the PJM grid, which extends from here, from the Pentagon to Wall Street, 60 million people, about the same number of people in the PJM grid as in this situation in Spain and Portugal and part of France right now, 60 million people. We were this close to having the same thing happening. Rolling blackouts. And when you have a rolling blackout like that, if you are all renewables, the flywheel's not there to kickstart and start that engine again, which is why they're having a challenge getting everything rolling again in Europe. But that morning at 5 a.m. on the day that President Trump was being inaugurated, we had 70% of the power in the PJM grid was coming from fossil fuels. 22% was coming from nuclear. 0 was from solar because it was 5 a.m. There's a catastrophic failure every 24 hours in the solars in producing with solar, because every night the sun goes down predictably and it produces no power. And I know that you're saying yes, batteries, but we're not there yet. You know we're not there yet in terms of that capability. We don't have enough battery storage to run New York to Washington, D.C. I mean, not even close. I mean, we can do load transfer for several hours for a household or maybe overnight, but we don't have the capability to support entire states and entire industries and AI data centers and manufacturing and defense and Wall Street. So we know that solution is not there, because all of you know that batteries are not operating on Moore's law. So we were there, but and then I say, okay, so we have 70% fossil fuels and 22% nuclear, and while nuclear is coming back into somewhat favor, and we're highly supportive of nuclear, we're highly supportive of exploring the cutting edge of fusion, we're highly supportive of small modular nuclear reactors. We know that there's VC dollars, but I think you all know that that's not going to be a solution for right now. I mean, that might be a solution for 2030, 2032, but right now we're facing a real existential threat, China. And what's going on in China? China opened up 94 gigawatts of coal last year. 1 gigawatt's Denver, okay? They opened up 94 Denver's worth of coal last year. And this is not U.S. beautiful, clean coal with all the emissions out. This is 1970s, type plants. They're just throw them up and go. Who cares about emissions? China in the Paris Accord could keep emitting until 2035. They could keep increasing their emissions. They're the world's largest emitter now by a huge margin. And they're being very successful at a strategy. We don't care about emissions, we care about power. We want to get power to all of our people. We have power to power manufacturing. We have power to win the AI arms race. That's what their strategy is. And they've got 30 nuclear plants under construction. They're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on hydro. I mean, they've effectively, with the Yangtze, it's like it'd be like us building a dam on the Grand Canyon. Can you imagine? I mean, we're tearing down dams. They're building dams. Hydro is great baseload power. So it's like, we could lose We could have a slight technological edge, and we could maybe even have a longer one if you could actually protect our IP. But if we can't protect our IP, then we have to win the power race, and we're losing the power race. President Trump declared on day one a national energy emergency. Critics say, well, we don't have an emergency. We've got record amounts of oil and gas production. They're missing the whole point. We have a critical minerals emergency, which I don't have time to speak about this morning. But the founders up here said it. I mean, 85% of the refining of rare earth minerals and critical minerals is done in China. They've got with their Belt and Road, whether it's pulling it out of the Congo or Indonesia, open pit mining, slave labor, no reclamation. Yeah, they got low cost. Anybody in the U.S., you get behind a critical mineral, rare earth mineral startup in this country, and guess what? China dumps into the country. So we're working on a plan at NEDC where we've got to have sovereign risk insurance, not against a foreign country, but against our own, that if you put capital into a project that's related to fossil fuels or project related to critical minerals and mining, that if somebody comes along in a future administration with an executive order that if they want to wipe out if they want to wipe out what you've invested in, they've got to write you a check to pay you for your lost capital. Future administration shouldn't be able to say, no, with a stroke of a pen, we're going to kill this pipeline project, even though that company's got $3 billion in the ground in pipe, labor, and easements, moving a legal product legally permitted, but we've just decided we don't like it for idealistic, extremist reasons. That if they want to do that, they may have the executive power to do that, but they should have to write a check to you and your companies. And so sovereign risk insurance is one thing. We need stockpiling of critical minerals in this country across the top 20 ones where we're most exposed, just like we have a strategic petroleum reserve. We have to do that. And then we've got to think about, actually, for the first time, the federal government itself getting in as a partner with you as an equity investor in companies that are doing the processing. And we're moving at this at light speed, because right now, if there was an actual war going on right now, we are in a huge precarious position relative to China, because we did manage to kill, along with the timber industry, we've tried to kill the grazing industry, not we, but the previous administrations. And certainly mining has been about as welcomed as coal in this country. But when we develop coal, you should also remember there's two kinds of coal, thermal and metallurgical. But on metallurgical coal, you need it for steel. And all of you know that we've got to have steel going in our country. If we want to get back in shipbuilding, if we want to get back into defense, we have to have that. And so again, this is why that it's not just drill baby drill, it's map baby map. We've got to figure out where all the resources are, and believe me, we have them. Just in Interior, there's 500 million acres of surface, 700 million acres of subsurface, and 2.5 billion acres of offshore. All of these, we can protect every square inch of our national parks. We can protect, every square inch of our national wildlife refuges, because they make up a small portion of those numbers, those massive amounts of lands that I just talked. Our last best special places we can take better care of than we ever have before. And how are we going to take care of them? Because we're going to actually drive revenue. The largest balance sheet in the world would be the U.S. federal government, throw in another 200 million acres from the U.S. Forest Service. There isn't a company in the world, not even Saudi Aramco, that come even close with the balance sheet that the Department of Interior plus USDA would have. But what's our return on that? You're all investors. What's the return? The return. When Theodore Roosevelt put away those lands, he said that was for the benefit and the use of the American people. That was for all of us. You've all been told, you all know the answer right now. If I gave you a quiz to one question, what's the U.S. debt? In your head, you're all saying to yourself, $36.5 trillion, because you all know the number. If I said to all of you, next question, what's the asset side of that same balance sheet? How many trillion on the asset side? If there's 300 of you here, we'd have 300 different answers, because there is not an answer in Washington, D.C., because you could maybe go over to Treasury and they'll tell you, here's what our financial assets are. What's the value of the 500 million acres of timber and land and rare earth minerals? We got a rough estimate last week. Just the coal resources in this country could be worth $8 trillion. Just the coal on public lands, not the coal that's on private lands. We just found out last week there might be 23% more oil and gas underneath the Gulf of America than was previously thought a month ago. We know that now that there's an opportunity to develop critical minerals from undersea mining and do that safely. We have such an opportunity to get a return for all of you and your children and your children's children, get a return on the amazing assets that is the natural resources of this country. If we want to balance the budget, if we want to reduce interest rates, we have to thoughtfully do what Theodore Roosevelt said, because he said that conservation was as much development, sustainable development, as is preservation. And so we have a huge opportunity in this country going forward. We can win the AI arms race with China. We can have enough power to power our cities. We can build grid security. We can support all of you. And we can get back in the game where we're not relying on imports for all of the things, because we've shut down American development across all of our public lands. And in closing, I want to say, I'm sure that you're saying, hey, I've got a bunch of team members. That's great. You said that. We're here in Washington. But all of the people that work for us, still believe that, that we've got to save the world. We've got to save the environment. We got to stop, cutting any trees. And we stop cutting trees, after the spot at all. Now we burn more board feet of timber by many, many tens of millions a year than we actually harvest. Okay, we burn it because we got uncontrolled forest fires, because there hasn't been forest management for 30 years in this country on public lands. And it kills people, it kills communities, it kills jobs. Interesting. But if we were doing the forest management and we were harvesting the timber, all of you would be participating and receiving a check, because the federal government, when we sell timber sales, we get money in. When we fight fires and come in afterwards and have to spend tens or hundreds of billions of dollars on recovery, that's all coming out of your pockets. Do you want to get paid, or do you want to pay? That's on every one of these topics: timber, grazing, oil and gas, critical minerals. No one would run a business where you would decide all you do is pay out, print money and pay out, as opposed to get checks in. This is essential to how we build a better, stronger government. But we can do all the things we need to support this industry. We can absolutely do that. And in doing that, we are going to win the AI arms race with China. We're going to bring prosperity here to home, and we're going to bring peace abroad. And peace abroad begins when we sell energy to our friends and allies. They can stop funding conflicts against us with the sales of oil and gas to specifically who? China. When we have failed sanctions in Russia and Iran on oil and gas exports, the dark fleet, which now represents 25% of the world's shipping, we've just turned our adversaries into China's discount gas station. So under the Trump administration, we're in a 180-degree turnaround to a different direction. We're moving in a direction that is completely aligned with all the things we want to do. And I would say, again, for your team members that are concerned, they should be insisting that every ounce of energy, every electron that we make is made in the U.S., because we do it cleaner, safer, smarter than anywhere else in the world. When you shut down U.S. energy production, you don't do anything to demand. You just push it. You push that supply to people that don't do it as cleanly as we do. So it's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, it's good for prosperity, it's good for world peace. That's the Trump plan, and that's what we're doing right now. Thanks for letting me spend some time with you. Have a fantastic day this morning.